Well, welcome, thrice welcome. We're ticking up to 500 online with us, 800 registered, and so wherever you are across North America to the South Pacific, across Asia to Europe, welcome to old familiar colleagues and friends, and special greetings to the new faces that are joining us today. As I mentioned, my name's Chris Adams, Head of Research and Insights at Miles, and we've been committed to education and outreach for decades. Many of you have joined us on webinars in the past. And Miles, we've been around 65 plus years working with thousands of tourism businesses and hundreds of destination marketing organizations around the world. And throughout this time, we've always tried to be a trusted partner and resource for collecting and sharing and disseminating thoughtful insights and information. And in these remarkable times, the need is perhaps never greater. So what we've tried to do is redouble our commitment to industry education and support. And this webinar series is an expression of that. So as the name suggests, clarity in a time of crisis, we've reached out to our best research and data partners. We're connecting with destination marketing organizations around the world and curating and summarizing insights. And in this first edition of the webinar, we'll be probing the latest US research on the impact of COVID-19 with Longwoods International, and we'll pop across the Atlantic, get some practical examples and insights on how Eylon is handling the crisis, all in around 30 minutes. With perhaps a few questions and answers to run us over that time. So in our webinar series today, our resource center online, and I'll talk about that again briefly, we've tried to answer three critical questions. You can see them there. Providing insights on the current situation, identifying opportunities for action, and then identifying the timing of those opportunities, what to focus on now and what to focus on next. So we're doing this by curating and summarizing insights, case studies, and resources from across leading research and data providers internationally and in the US, and DMOs from around the world. So please check out our resource center, which was launched last week, and I'll highlight a couple of those resources at the end. So let's jump into it today, and we're joined by two real authorities and sage advisors for our first webinar. Amir Eylon is President and CEO of Longwoods International, one of North America's real leaders in travel and tourism research for many, many decades. And Amir, are you safely locked down in Columbus, Ohio?
Yes, Chris, I am enjoying a sunny afternoon, and currently trying to manage a 18-year-old high school senior who's taking his frustrations out on not going to prom on a long, lengthy bike ride. So making best of it.
Very good, familiar experiences there to many of us, mate. And Niall, Tracey is Director of Marketing at Fáilte Island, the Irish Tourism Development Authority. And where in the Emerald Isle are you joining us from today, Niall? You might be on mute, I think, Niall. So we'll sort that out in a moment. In the meantime, let's move on and recognize our partners. Destinations International and US Travel Association are both doing extraordinary work in terms of distilling and sharing the latest insights. And our very familiar colleagues and friends at both DMA West and STS are also very supportive of our education program and outreach, and thanks for all of the what these organizations are doing. Today's agenda, we'll jump in first with Amir, and we'll be looking at the latest weekly edition of the US Traveller Sentiment Research Study and identify the sort of key takeaways. Where are we now, and what is the timing for the opportunity, as we discussed before. And then in our DMO interview today, we'll be reconnecting with Niall and talking about practical things that Eylon is tackling and how they're addressing COVID-19. We'll share some final resources and identify what's coming up in our series. So without further ado, let's pass it over to you, Amir.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you plan on being. There's a little bit of feedback coming through now. We might need mute the background. But anyway, good afternoon, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and happy to share with you some of our latest insights. This is a weekly process that we've been sharing with our partners for about the past month, and very happy to have Niall's partnership on board as a partner to help make sure that this data is available between Longwoods and Niall's. We're able to provide this at absolutely no charge to the industry here for the foreseeable future, so we're glad to be partnering on it. Let's talk about the research. So some of you may know Longwoods International is a market research consultancy specializing in the travel and tourism industry. For about the past 3 decades, we have been conducting something called Travel USA, which is the largest and longest ongoing study of traveling U.S. households. Every year we document between 300 to 350,000 trips taken by Americans. But that study pretty much takes a look at Americans' recent travel. We ask people about their previous 90 days worth of travel. And from that, build some very detailed profiles and learn a lot about those travelers. We had to change gears here. A little over a month ago, our team was actually gathered in Columbus, Ohio, here in our U.S. headquarters, looking doing some strategic planning, and obviously we saw the writing on the wall. We had good glimpse of what might be coming down the pike, and we said, what can we do to assist the industry? What's going to be needed that doesn't exist right now? And we said, we need to get a sentiment study going and look at how Americans are going to be thinking about travel moving forward. So literally a month ago, we launched the first wave of this. This is now the 4th wave. As you can see on your slide there, we fielded this one last Wednesday. Every Wednesday and Thursday, we go into the field. We sample 1,000 traveling Americans, adults, and we ask them a short questionnaire, about 10 or so questions about their outlook and sentiment towards travel in the next 6 months. So I'm going to share some highlights here for you, and we're going to move quickly here. So next slide. So one thing we saw from our survey from just a few days ago is that 84% of traveling Americans, those who are planning to travel in the next 6 months, have or will change their travel plans. As you can see in the slide there, just over half have canceled a trip completely. A little less than half have reduced their travel plans in some form or fashion. Probably more likely, on some of the data we're seeing, have reduced maybe a long haul getaway destination or international travel to something like a regional domestic drive market type of trip. Again, next slide, or not, sorry, next slide, the next stat there, almost a quarter have changed already to that, from a long haul destination to a regional drive market. And of course, continued shrinkage in international travel plans, as most people have canceled almost all their international travel plans at this point as borders are closed, etc. All right, so the beauty of having done this for a month now is we kind of have the trend lines. We can kind of see how we're tracking. So as you can see, the very first week, March 11th, when we fielded the first study, only 58% of American travelers said they were changing their travel plans in some form or fashion. That's now obviously gotten much higher to 84%, but we're slightly encouraged that it's steadied here. You see 2 weeks in a row, it's 84%. Now, are we approaching a ceiling or a floor, depending on how you look at it? Could be, or again, what's left are the people that are really looking at summer travel, later summer travel, and early fall travel is what we suspect. Next slide, please. So again, when we look at the other factors of how they changed their travel, we've seen a few things become clear, and maybe even a little stabilization on a few areas. Those who canceled their trip completely, again, from that very first week when it was only 28%, and now it's 53%. But you can see the last 2 to 3 weeks, the incremental rate of cancellation has decreased. It's been just directionally decreasing, but it may be, heading towards stabilizing now. Not as radical. Now, what's happened in those past couple of weeks? Obviously, we went from national emergency to into a few states going on shelter-in-place mode to most of the states now going into some form of shelter-in-place mode. So now it's kind of, it's kind of sunk in, and Americans have kind of changed their mindset a little bit, right? In terms of reducing travel plans, again, you can kind of see it was kind of relatively steady there in the mid to upper 30s, and now it's gone a little higher to 43%. Again, people are looking at perhaps canceling those or readjusting their longer trips that they've scheduled to maybe some quick, shorter getaways as soon as things restrictions start being lifted. Again, that change to regional drive markets versus flying. We see that happening, and that's to be expected here. And if you go back to 9/11 and so forth, you saw the regional markets, 9/11 and the recession that came after that, starting to recover faster than the long haul markets there. And of course, no need to even discuss international to domestic at this point. It's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we asked these traveling Americans what factors will be greatly impacting their decision to travel in the next 6 months. We give them a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being no impact at all, 5 being a great impact. And the 3 areas we're looking at is the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously, concerns about the economy, and cost of transportation. No surprise, the COVID-19 is overwhelmingly dominating your thinking right now. 67% of traveling Americans, if you add the 4s and the 5s together, you got about 83%. So that's not surprising. What's been interesting to us is the concerns about the economy. Only 25% indicating greatly impact there. So that's only gone up a couple percentage points, well within the margin of error in the last week here. So that's held pretty steady. Now we're going to watch this very carefully, because as the as we get past the peak of the virus, perhaps then at that point people are going to be thinking more about their pocketbook. But this kind of holds true with some other data that we've seen. We've seen some some international consumer sentiment studies looking at consumer sentiment towards the economy and other factors. And when it comes to the economy, generally speaking, consumers seem to be more concerned about the global or national economy than they are about their own pocketbook at this point. But again, that may change. Let's go to the next slide, please. We can look at the trend line. So again, COVID-19 greatly impacting decision to travel in the next 6 months. You can see where we've come from. And by the way, that March 11th date, I mean, that was one day before President Trump, declared a national emergency. And so you can see, where the spike went and so forth. But look, but again, it's a pretty consistent growth there. So let's go to the next slide. So the basic question: are you going to travel in the next 6 months? A month ago, 87% of Americans told us yes, they're going to be traveling the next 6 months. Yeah, it's spring break coming up, summer travels, and so forth. Their conferences, whatever that was. And now, as you can see, we've kind of gone down steadily down towards 65%. If there's a silver lining here you want to look at the fact that 2/3 of Americans, 2/3 of traveling Americans still believe they are going to be traveling in the next 6 months. And that speaks to that discussion that you hear everywhere about this pent-up demand that will be there. How will it release? Well, I think that's going to be determined by, how the restrictions get lifted and eased and a whole host of other factors. But there's a pent-up demand there. 2/3 of traveling Americans chomping at the bit to travel at the moment. So there you have it. And the last question that we'll have here, and that last I'll share with you, will be this kind of 10th question that we mix up a little bit every week. We kind of just want to throw this additional question and getting a little more insights and as things evolve. And this question developed in partnership with our friends at Miles was about how they're consuming travel content. Now that people are sitting at home, now that the world has been changing around them, how they've been consuming travel content. And some of you may be surprised to see that magazine articles, travel articles, and traditional print has come to the top there. And of course, the short video content and so forth has been strong as well. But this reinforces the fact that right now, many of you, through destination marketing organizations, and you've banked up all this content, you've banked up, you worked with your bloggers and curated a lot of videos and got all these things together. Push it out. People are home. They're waiting for it. Many of you have already started doing it. I've seen some wonderful things. Folks like Visit Savannah, State of Kentucky, a few others, done just some beautiful content sharing lately, and just push it out. It's good stuff. So anyway, Chris,
yeah, it also highlights, Amir, doesn't it, the multimedia nature of the content they're engaging with. 3 of those top 4 content types are traditional media. So obviously we're in a very much a sort of digitally focused world in terms of how we're communicating and interacting. But some of those traditional things that destinations and businesses are doing can still be enormously impactful. Yep. Quick question about methodology that's come in. Oh, and I should flag before I get to that question, all the slides from today, plus a research summary, plus the recording are all going to be available both on our COVID-19 education portal and sent out to all participants via email. So the question, Amir, was about your methodology, 1,000 sample size. Is it a nationally representative sample of American travelers? Is it leisure and or business?
Yeah, absolutely. It is traveling a mix of leisure and business. It's randomly drawn from our panel I was telling you about earlier. 1,000 adults, ages 18 and over. All the quotas are used to match census targets for age, gender, region, etc. So we really want to make sure that the sample is the survey is representative of the U.S. population.
Very good. And are you polling, Rebecca's asking, are you polling at the same 1,000 travelers or are they different sampling?
No, we it's important to keep the panel fresh. It's important to keep refreshing folks in there. So it's a random group every week in there. So we're keeping it fresh.
Okay, and Bill Fitzgerald's asking about the content question. Bill, that's the first time we've asked that question, but we are going to be asking it every 2 or so weeks, and so we'll certainly have some tracking and trending data on that. And you can see on your screen this summary created with Longwoods and ourselves is available both on our site and on Longwoods' site. Plus, there's actually a full slide deck available. And again, all those resources will be shared after today. Just one additional survey question I wanted to highlight from last week's survey, and again, we'll be repeating this every so often. We wanted to ask locals what sort of information they were looking for. And you can see there's a really strong interest in understanding how locals and visitors can connect with and support businesses that are, of course, in most cases closed down. So is there opportunities to engage with them, whether it be takeout, takeaways, or find other ways to support those businesses? So we'll be actually summarizing in a blog and article in the next week before our next webinar some of the most remarkable examples we've seen from around the world on how destinations are doing exactly this. Okay, so let's move on, and hopefully Niall's with us. Oh, and we'll be including in that blog a range of examples, as I mentioned, from both across the US and around the world. Okay, so let's see if Niall is with us again. Are you there, Niall?
Yes. I am, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very good. And we'll get Amir back with us at the end. Great, you could be with us, Niall. And so Obviously, Ireland is in a particular situation with regards to the COVID-19. Do you want to start off by just sharing in 60 seconds or so where is Ireland at with regards to COVID-19 and its impact on travel and tourism?
Yeah, listen, we're no different to pretty much the rest of the world, and so Ireland, we're a small island, off an island off the west coast of Europe, and actually, we've a population in Ireland of about 6 million people, but yes, we have a total tourism of about 20 million, 10 million from overseas and 10 million kind of domestic. But we're very heavily reliant on those overseas for revenue from tourism. Like 2/3 of our total revenue from tourism actually comes from those overseas visitors, and so it is tourism is a big part of our economy, and like many countries, we're currently in shutdown. I think there's quite positivity that the government have handled it quite well. They seem to have reacted quite quickly in lots of the restrictions they've put in place, and so at the moment there's quite actually, to be honest, there's more compliance with the restrictions than I would have expected there to be, and I suppose the hope is that continues. So being in Ireland, we're always susceptible of people kind of obviously traveling from overseas and reinfecting the population. So it's back to where a very similar place to everybody else, locked down and just trying to hibernate the sector before we kickstart hopefully later in the year.
Sure, and we can see on the screen just how important international tourism is to Ireland. You've always had a role in domestic as an organisation. So how has Fáilte Ireland been affected in terms of staffing and budget and, the resources you can bring to bear to this crisis?
Yes, I to be honest, we're quite lucky because we're government funded. We've been able to hold on to our budgets and our staff so far because our official role is the National Tourism Development Authority. So they've got a map of Ireland where the very deep red is where the tourism is at its highest. And so one of our big remits is to try and spread that tourism across the country, into kind of rural parts of Ireland, because I suppose we see tourism as a huge potential economic driver into kind of, to get people to be able to stay in the communities outside of cities. But I said one of the great challenges we have is, if you think about it, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're just coming out of winter. So this was in many ways the worst possible month for this crisis to hit. Businesses have spent their cash that they made last summer, keeping the business open, and we're really reliant on a good summer to kickstart again. But thankfully, we've been able to hold on to our staff and our budgets to hopefully support the sector and keep that domestic tourism kind of alive and kicking.
So do you want to share, Niall, what are you focusing on immediately in terms of the next month or so, and then perhaps, maybe 2-3 months out, what's your medium-term plans in terms of how you're addressing the crisis?
Yeah. It is funny, we, as an organisation, we've completely changed in the last month, so, like tourism in Ireland is full of small businesses, whether it's a small hotel, it's it's kind of a tour guide, or the beautiful scenery, or even kind of, our kind of our key attractions that we have. And there's some big ones like Guinness, but it's also loads and loads of small businesses. And these are mom and pop businesses, from bed and breakfast to attractions to kind of activity providers like walking and cycling. So our big focus for the last few weeks has been literally on the word survival, trying to help those businesses literally stay afloat. So they've all pretty much had to close down. But what we did was we set up a new website, similar to yourself, Chris, in Miles, where we put together kind of our best kind of like business support advice. So it was a series of webinars that we created. We literally shot them over the last couple of weeks to put them up. And to know what's interesting is that like the most popular, the three most popular of those three you can see on your screen. Business liquidity, which is because actually cash is king. They've spent a lot of their cash over the winter getting ready for new money coming in that isn't going to arrive now. HR, because it's a great staff, and right now they've had to let them go. How do you let staff go in a way that hopefully you can bring them back on when business starts to open up again? And the third most popular webinar we have is managing temporary closure, which is, and it's this idea of how do you kind of hibernate your business in a way that lets you kind of open up hopefully later in the season. And interestingly, that's the short-term focus, providing businesses, tourism businesses around the country with that business advice. Also on our website is one around marketing, and that's more about thinking ahead, which is more about, so if you are a small business, a hotel, a B&B, an attraction, how do you keep your brand alive when you can't really be promoting your services or you can't be offering great offers? And so you've got a great advice there about how you can still kind of keep yourself promoted by using your destination, kind of like recipes from your area or the history of your area. So just information you can seed out in digital that still makes your area really appealing, while not saying, listen, we're not promoting yourself as a business that's open. So that hopefully when people then do start looking again and traveling again, then actually they're thinking of your destination and hopefully your business as somewhere to visit.
So Niall, can you, in addition to that, and there's obviously some great resources there, I've had the opportunity to look through some of those videos, and frankly any destination could have a look at what you've done and use that as a template, so well done. What are a couple of other practical examples of things you've undertaken or lessons you've learned about what you're doing?
It was interesting, I found from Amir's research that he was talking there about that, the American population are looking to still got a lot of plans to travel over the next 6 months. And interestingly, the tracker we have here in Ireland is very similar. A number of weeks ago, people were saying they'd travel in 2 months, but just last week, the latest results came back that they're now talking about 4 to 5. And it is that sense of, listen, it's going to be a while before they're going to get a chance to go on holiday. But we also think that domestic is going to be the first one to open, because actually I think that we believe there's huge pent-up demand there, that we're all stuck at home, stuck with our families, and the idea of being about getting away is something that I think is going to be really appealing. It's ironic in some ways and unfortunate in developing our own domestic campaign, like a promotional campaign just to get people in Ireland, stay in Ireland. We launched a new campaign called Keep Discovering 2 weeks before the crisis happened. So we had a whole 2 weeks of media bought and ready to go before we had to publish completely. And so at least we had that in the can, ready to go for when we open up again. But I think what's interesting, and I think this is going to be and I think this might be similar kind of in all markets, is that the Keep Discovering idea was based on, listen, you're local, in this case, Ireland. So, but actually, there's loads of amazing places in Ireland that you actually don't know. So actually, you need to go stay in Ireland and go discover some of these new amazing places. So that's where the Keep Discovering idea was. But now we're thinking for the kickstart, if like, is that not sure people will be in that frame of mind. We think people might want to go back to actually places where they're actually find familiar. Because if you think about your needs here, we spent the whole time, we spent weeks, if not months at home with our families, very restricted. So I must say, the idea for me to go down to my local pub and have a pint is hugely appealing. To go to my favorite restaurant and maybe go to a destination that I've been to before, because I know I'm going to have a great time. I know it's going to be the comfort and security of, listen, we go there, that's going to be brilliant fun. So I think people's needs and what they're going to be looking for when the restrictions are lifted, I think they're going to be different than where they were 6 months ago. I think there will be pent-up demand, assuming that there isn't a huge recession. But I think tactical, sales-driven messages that say to people, hey, come back, you've had a great time, come back here. Encouraging businesses to use their own databases, contact people who visited before and say, listen, we're back open for business, come back and have another great holiday. I think that could well be a key short-term opportunity that I think we're going to be trying to focus in on once the restrictions are lifted.
Yeah, and perhaps an extension of that is visiting friends and family, which is already a big part of travel. Then, people, of course, connecting digitally, the chance to actually reconnect in person could be very compelling.
Absolutely, because it's your friends, your family you miss. Like, it's great having the Zoom calls and the Microsoft Team calls, but actually, I think we're missing is that kind of just that sociability of being in the presence of other people, and particularly kind of friends and family, I think that's where people would go to first. That comfort of reconnecting in person again.
Yeah. So that suggests obviously looking at your past email databases, your past connections on social, and looking at those assets you've got where you can rekindle those connections. So, Niall, any final piece of advice for the destinations who are joining us today from all over the world? Obviously, everybody's right in the midst of crisis, but what one or two final pieces of advice would you offer?
Well, I suppose what I just say is, listen, this is a classic. I think we could all draw this chart in our sleep. And but I suppose the reason I would share this one with you is, I think we all hope. I think we all, listen, in tourism, we're natural optimists, and we all hope that things will get back to normal sooner rather than later. But I'm conscious of, in Ireland, we are very reliant on overseas visitors. And our sense is that actually overseas may take actually a number of years to come back. I think we're all seeing the impact it's having on our airlines and the crisis that a lot of those are in as regards to financial crisis, and many of them will close, some of them will have to require to be taken over by governments. So the number of flights available just won't be the same next year than there was last year. So I think what I'd be saying is, listen, it's really important that we actually hope and plan, and look forward to kind of hopefully the market coming back in, hopefully over the summer or in the early autumn. But I know one thing what we are doing is we're also planning that actually it's going to be longer than that. That actually the crisis lasts longer, that it takes longer to get a vaccine. And I think it's like planning for a worst case scenario, which means that 2021 is when the market comes back, while hoping for a shorter time frame. I think that's something I would definitely advise any DMO around the world, because that is still a very strong possibility that this may just take longer. At least if we planned it for in advance, we'll all be in a better place to kind of to get through this crisis and still be around when the market starts to open up again.
Yeah, we've thought about it in three ways, Niall. There's obviously the travel restrictions, lockdowns, border restrictions, etc. Then there's going to be the obviously the official health advice connected with that. Then secondly, there's going to be the perception. So do people feel safe traveling, comfortable? And then thirdly, there's the economic issues around the fallout of the recession we're likely to see pretty much across the world. So what the lingering impact of that might be. So it's definitely going to be a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunate because so many of us have only 10 years ago kind of kicked into a huge recession and have enjoyed coming out of it over the last few years, hit with this another both kind of health shock and economic shock. But hopefully we're leaner and faster this time to be able to handle it even better than the last recession.
Very good. Okay, well, let's get Amir back up on the screen just while I share some resources, and then we'll come back with some final questions. And thanks for those people who've been sharing. We've got an enormous number of questions here, so we could just have a quick look at some of the resources we want to share with you. So we've mentioned our portal. So you'll find on there both upcoming webinars, and in fact we've curated a list of other leading webinars from leading industry organizations such as Destinations International, US Travel, and a number of our data and research partners. Under the data tracking section, curated research, we've actually got sort of 7 data points there. We've grouped together in the insight section, blogs, articles, and other resources, and we've got a whole exploit sources, basically authoritative health and travel guidance. You can also sign up for our weekly email, plus anybody who registers for our webinar will of course receive the update. So check out, it's updated every 2 weeks, if not more quickly. 7 data insights that basically show the impact of COVID-19. We've curated that research from a variety of partners, including Longwoods, Adara, Destination Analysts, Sparkloft, Uber Media, and others. So thank you very much for those guys' support, and you can then click through to see in detail the individual research. So we've tried to make sense of what is an increasing and sometimes bewildering range of information that's available. In terms of other resources that are coming up, I'll just mention our weekly email that will be going out that will distill and sort of curate those various tools and resources. You'll see here in the insight section, we'll also be highlighting some of the most useful resources, including today, or the email that will go out tomorrow, actually a set of free tools around how businesses can use the Google My Business platform to ensure that their information is up to date and current and relevant. The upcoming webinars with Uber Media in Chattanooga, that's next week, and Chattanooga amongst CVBs in the States has really been one of the leaders in terms of taking a very aggressive and immediate action, and have really quite a impressive range of actions they've got to showcase. So Dave will be joining us from Chattanooga Tourism Company, Erin from Destination Analysts, and Kathy Ritter, very familiar to many of you, from Colorado Tourism Office, will be joining us on the 21st. And then Focusrite, they're actually doing an international research study on the impact of COVID-19. It's going to be in the field in a week or so, so it'll be very current and timely, looking at the international travel implications, and they'll be joining with Dave Lorenz from Travel Michigan. Then we've got Helsinki City, a variety of other international destinations joining us. All these resources are available on that portal at the top, plus wonderful resources both on Longwoods site and Niall shared their very impressive portal. Certainly check that out in the video series, which there's some great pointers. So in terms of just a final couple of questions before we wrap up, we've got a question about barriers to travel. Do we think that the primary issue is going to be the actual barriers, guidelines, lockdowns sort of freeing up, or this lingering perception of safety? Which of those two is going to be the major sort of issue in how the recovery is going to pan out?
Well, I think it's going to be a mix.
First.
I think it's going to be a mix, right? I mean, you're going to look at, first of all, restrictions aren't going to be eased probably consistently across the country. It's going to be done on a state-by-state basis or regional basis, or because the orders have come down from the state level, not from the federal level. So that's why in some areas regional drive markets will probably fare much better in terms of recovery and in terms of speed of recovery. But there will be a lingering fear there, right? You're going to have, because what's going to be the natural instinct? Well, I'm going to go, the restrictions lifted, I'm going to dip my toe in the water. My wife and I will go out to dinner. Okay, that was great. We're fine. Now maybe we'll take a day trip somewhere. Okay, that was fine. Now I'm going to do a weekend getaway somewhere. Okay, that was fine. Now maybe they've opened restrictions, and the airlines have convinced me that they're sanitizing their planes, and the hotels have convinced me that they're sanitizing their rooms. So then I'll finally do that longer haul trip, etc. I think that's going to be kind of. I think that's going to be. It's going to be a combination. It's not going to be one or the other. It's going to have to be both. What do you think, Niall?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's the fact that you build up your own kind of reassurance by kind of starting small and expanding to a weekend and then a further field. So I think that's one of the reasons why domestic will do better initially, because we all know our own country, and I think we're all well up on the news and the latest trends in our own country. So I think we're happy to travel within our own country because we have a sense of what it's going to be like when we get to that destination. I think that's one of the big challenges with overseas, is that we're just inherently that further away. We're not really clear about what's going on in that country, and I think that will slow people making that judgment to get on an airplane, to commit that kind of finances. It'll just feel easier and safer to stay domestic initially and just a bit of a wait and see for overseas. And so I'd agree with Amir on that.
Niall, a great question from Nancy that she wanted to ask you. So what are you planning to rebuild or reshape? So how are you thinking about this crisis as an opportunity to be better?
that's it's interesting. I think what we're doing is what's great about the crisis is that actually, and I'm going to give a specific example. Business has been very good for the last 2 years. So we had this team called Business Support who would do things like webinars and that kind of like business information. And to be honest, they weren't, because the business didn't really need support, they were already kind of doing well and making money anyway. But what this crisis has created is a real focus on actually, as a DMO, we have an opportunity to really help and support by providing, while we're not experts in the field, we can get that expert, get them on a camera to explain what something means in a tourism setting and then put it up on our website. So lots of these small businesses can't get access to expertise. We get access and we can share with them all. And I think one of the big things we're going to be changing is, I think our role in trying to help all the individual tourism businesses with that kind of business support is now going to, I think we've made that change in the last month, and I think that's going to be with us now for the next number of years. I think that's going to be a really positive change for us as regards to how we can help the industry as well as kind of grow the sector.
Yeah, and we were discussing, weren't we, Niall, looking ahead to Earth Day, which is April the 22nd, 50th anniversary of Earth Day. The issue of sustainability is not front and center right now, but you were saying that that's also an area that your organization and Eylon collectively is going to be looking at in terms of sustainability.
I think we're very lucky in Ireland, and I think when we, the perception of Ireland overseas is that it's actually a great, environmentally green country, and I suppose it's great to have kind of rolling green fields as one of your visual icons. I think that whole connection to nature is a very real part of a visit to Ireland. But I think a lot of the practical things as regards how we can reduce our carbon footprint, I think there's still a long ways that we can go with that. So only the last 6 months, we've developed a new kind of actually tourism, a sustainability tourism policy with the government. As I said, we are a government agency in order to try and drive that kind of sustainable message. And not only and I think it's less about actually how we promote ourselves. I think we're going to focus more on practical things that we can try and do on the ground with industry, with how things are developed to make sure they're done in a kind of a good environmental protective way. And I think that's going to be quite in some ways that's an opportunity that as long as I think many people are now kind of up for with the whole refocus on climate change.
Yeah, and it's interesting to observe, isn't it, how the world's reacted in such a very sort of positive way around responding to an immediate threat. Obviously, the longer term, somewhat more vague threat of climate change has been difficult to get collective action. Perhaps this crisis might be illustrative for how we need to tackle that longer term issue of climate change. So let's wrap it up. And thank very much Amir with Longwoods International. Thank you, Amir. And we'll be working with you in the coming weeks, updating that research, and that's going to be available both off our site and Longwoods site. You can see the web addresses there. And we'll have you back in about perhaps a month to 6 weeks to reflect on what's happening, but every week we'll be sharing that updated tracking research, and Longwoods will be in touch as well. And Niall, thank you so much for joining us. We'll stay in touch, and we'll be sharing observations and examples from Eylon, because there's obviously a lot to be learned from our destination friends and colleagues all over the world. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to everybody who joined us today, and we look forward to staying in touch. And stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, and remain positive. We look forward to being back with you next week and in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.